We are delighted to welcome our very accomplished track keynote speaker, Alison Cossette, who is a dynamic data science strategist, educator, and podcast host. As a developer advocate at Neo4j, specializing in graph data science, she brings a wealth of expertise to the field. With her strong technical background and exceptional communication skills, Alison bridges the gap between complex data science concepts and practical applications. Alison's passion for responsible AI shines through in her work. She actively promotes ethical and transparent AI practices and believes in the transformative potential of responsible AI for industries and society. Alison's academic journey includes a Master of Science in Data Science Studies, specializing in AI at Northwestern University, and research with the Stanford University Human-Computer Interactive Crowd Research Collective. Overall, Alison Cossette's multifaceted background, commitment to responsible AI, and expertise in data science make her a highly respected figure in the field. Through her role as a developer advocate at Neo4j and our podcast, she continues to drive innovation, education, and responsible practices in the exciting realm of data science and AI. Please extend a warm ODSC welcome to Alison Cossette.
Hello, everyone. I want to say thank you so much for having me here. Just going to get my screen set up for you all. All right, Anna, I just want to make sure that you can see everything okay?
Everything is perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, I am honored to be here today talking to you all as the keynote speaker in one of our ML tracks at ODSC. I'm a longtime fan of ODSC. I think my first one was in 2016 in Boston, so I'm super excited to be here with you all today. So as Seamus so nicely introduced, he gave you a good introduction on my background, but I'm going to dive into some of these pieces a little bit more in my background so that I can get you to understand how I came to be where I am within the realm of responsible AI. So as Seamus mentioned, I had originally done some work in Stanford Crowd Research back in 2015. And what we were doing at that time was working on, we were a group of researchers around the world, and we were working on sort of an understanding of Mechanical Turk. What we now know within the generative AI space is all of the folks who were doing the tagging and the labeling. And at that time, one of the things that we were looking at was, how do we put ethics into algorithms? How do we program the values that are required in this space within that realm? From there, I went on to work in the hospital and the medical fields at the University of Vermont Medical Center, as well as Remedy Partners. And in those instances, I was working in healthcare. And one of the things that I was responsible for was doing workforce planning. So how many doctors do we need and where? And it became clear to me as I continued on through my journey that the decisions that we make and the decisions we make throughout that machine learning lifecycle, and every time we set a piece of code, is having a direct impact. And so it became clear it was having an impact on the patients. And at Remedy, it was how doctors and institutions were addressing care. And then I moved to Data Robot, and I was working with large automated machine learning, and we had folks from all different kinds of backgrounds, and all of these different decisions that were happening within this cycle were having these large impacts. And simultaneously, I've always been a teacher. So I've taught for a variety of boot camps at different institutions. And one of the things that I would sit down and I would talk to my students about always is this basic idea that every single line of code that we write as data scientists and every single algorithm that we build has a societal impact. And they didn't always see that right away. So for example, on here we have NPD. I was working in a market research firm for a number of years, and I worked on attribution, so understanding different features of items on a receipt. And so I explained it to them like this. So if I am responsible for determining if a garment is a men's garment, a women's garment, a children's garment, and we recognize that as the world is changing, those boundaries among those things are ever more fluid. if I don't pick up on an imbalanced data set, if I don't pick up on, say, a unisex garment, or if I don't pick up on a plus size garment or a big and tall garment, what does that mean? Well, what that means is the decisions that are being based on that. So what the buyers are going to put into the store. If the buyers don't put those items into the store, and let's say I'm plus size or I'm looking for something gender neutral, if I go into the store and I can't find a garment that I can wear that represents myself as I move through the world, what is that going to do to me, even just emotionally? How am I going to feel when I leave that store? How am I going to react to my friends and family around me? How am I going to feel about myself? And so something as simple as whether or not a garment is a particular line or style or size seems very innocuous. But in reality, what we're finding is that every piece of code that we write, every line, every choice we make is always going to have some sort of societal impact. So obviously, if I'm working at the hospital, whether or not we have a particular type of doctor, whether or not we have a cardiologist, the right number of cardiologists has a direct impact. So where I want you to start this conversation today is really start at looking at your own history and the algorithms that you are currently or previously have worked on, and start to ask yourselves, what is my societal impact of the algorithms that I'm responsible for? Is it obvious what that rolls out to? If at any point you have any questions or you would like to join in the conversation, I do have access to the chat. So I would love to hear what folks are thinking as the conversation goes on. So please do not be shy. So as Seamus mentioned, my background, I started out at NYU, I studied at Northwestern, and I worked at Stanford. And for me, I've had the privilege of having this really great support system and this really great network. And I've been privileged to be able to have these ethical questions and explore these ethical questions in these various spaces. So what we're going to talk about today, though, is now that we're in this age of generative AI, let's take a look at what responsible AI means, and let's see what it means to you as the data scientist and the practitioner. So what is the state of Gen AI? Well, obviously you're here. We all know the year that we've had, right? I think ChatGPT went public in November of 2022. I will be honest, I taught my children how to use it right away. They were using it to make up stories with some friends back in December of last year. But as we look to what's forward and when we see what's happened over the last year, we see obviously Gen AI is going to become a $1.3 trillion market in the next 9 years. And so what does that mean to us as data scientists? Well, we're in the thick of it now, right? I will tell you that for the first time, I've been a data scientist a long time, and I don't think I've ever had a conversation with my father, who's almost 80 right now, really too much about AI. He's like, oh, it's that thing she does. And recently we were sitting at the kitchen table at a Sunday dinner with the family, and my brother happens to work at AWS, and my father says, oh, I was talking with your brother and he said, this whole generative AI thing is really big. And he said he was talking about ChatGPT, but I don't really know what that is. And so I went to start to explain it to him. And at that point, my boys, who are 10 and 12, begin to explain this conversation to my 80-year-old father about what is generative AI. So they're trying to explain what ChatGPT is and how they use it. And it was really interesting to me because I was like, okay, not only is it this unbelievable boom, which we're talking about, but also it's the first time that AI has been a conversation, a multi-generational conversation in our family. My brother recently came to visit, and again, it was the hot topic at the dinner table. So one of the things that we want to start to understand is not just that from an economic perspective, we have this incredible boom that's going on right now. I mean, the amount of funding alone into generative AI companies, whether they're the foundation model folks or whether they're people who have building new products and new opportunities upon it, we're seeing it everywhere and it's rampant. So yeah, 1.3 trillion coming our way. So here's the thing, and Elon Musk, whether you like him or not, like what he said is, I really believe sums it up, is that Gen AI is the most powerful tool for creativity that has ever been created. It has this potential to unleash a new era of human innovation. And we're seeing it already. We're seeing it in life sciences. We're seeing it within the way code can be produced. We're seeing how people are producing synthetic data sets in ways they were never able to before. I know in my family, one of my sons has autism, and so he's got a writing disability. And so for him, it's been an incredible way for him to now be present in his classroom in a way that he was not able to before. He has something called dysgraphia, and it means that he has a hard time getting the words from his brain onto the paper. And so now he can sort of talk around what he's trying to get to, and these LLM models can help him get to that place. So I think we all understand that right now there is a seismic shift happening in our industry and in the world at large. One of the important pieces about Gen AI and why this year has been as it has is that historically, the public didn't have the opportunity to push and pull the levers, right? Being able to build AI and play with it was kind of like our playground. Those of us who could code and what we were working on in the background and talking about on our Discord channels and, collaborating with our peers, either in academic institutions or in commercial settings or, just at hackathons. But now all of a sudden, the general public can actually play with it. So instead of AI being one way, as it had been previously with recommendation engines and search engines and different types of models that we were using to provide different opportunities for people, this is the first time that the public was able to use it and use it in a way that they could comprehend, right? Being able to interface in a natural language way is significant. And so now we see every company is, how can I use Gen AI? Every organization is it just about putting the face on it that someone can talk to our systems? Or do we need to build something that's based on that and create something new? So is it the interface or is it the actual generation? And there's so many interesting ways and interesting things that people are doing. So what happens now, as in this conversation with my family at the dinner table with my 80-year-old father and my 10 and 12-year-old sons, all of a sudden now the spotlight is on data scientists. The spotlight is on us, right? There's a few years back, they told us that the data scientist was the sexiest job of the 21st century, right? Thomas Davenport and DJ Patel in October of 2012, and I'm sure everybody heard that, the data scientist, sexiest job of the 21st century. The boot camps were full, the data science and the machine learning programs at academic institutions were getting bigger and bigger every day. But we were still in the background. And I was speaking with a fellow data scientist recently, one of my former students, and she said, the role of the data scientist is changing. We're no longer the coder in the back room. I'm sitting at the table with the business leaders, answering hard questions and making important decisions. And it's not in this quote, but I have to tell you, it was a very hard moment for this data scientist. And as I was talking to other people, I was seeing like, this is what's going on. All of a sudden, the data scientist who, like I said, was previously, I worked as an IC for a long time. So I'd be here in my office, like doing my little models. And then at some point I'd have to put together a quick report on what the model is and what it does and how it's doing in production. But now we are part of the conversation. They're relying on us to participate and to create this new world and create this new realm. I mean, I don't know, is it, maybe you guys can pop into the chat and let me know. Anybody here all of a sudden get pulled into a meeting that they had never previously been in before and have someone ask you, like, what's this Gen AI? What do we need to know? How do we use it? Because I can tell you, I know many people who were, and the data scientists were trying to get caught up because many of them were just in this place where they were in production settings and they were moving forward. So a couple of things happened in this moment for us as data scientists. The first thing that happens is all of a sudden we have a voice, which is super exciting, right? But also we have a voice, which means now we have a more transparency and more eyes are on us of what are the decisions we're making, what are we contributing, how can we help move this forward. So we've got that happening. Simultaneously, as everybody knows, like regulation has been moving forward and the conversation about responsible AI has been happening. And I think the hardest thing initially from a responsible AI point when the Gen AI came around, now the imaging Gen AI was more prominent before the LLMs. But Regina Sampenti, who is an IP attorney here in the US, stated there are serious legal issues that exist around using training data involving materials with copyright, terms of service violation, reputational harm issues. And that's just one piece. I mean, historically, when we think about our training data, we want to make sure, okay, is it clean? Is it tidy? Most of the time you're using something like maybe an open source data, maybe some weather data, maybe some government data, or you are using your proprietary data sets. And while there were concerns previously about, scraping and privacy, for the most part, I don't think a lot of us in many situations were questioning, do I need to know about the law in order to use this data set? What do I, as the data scientist, need to know about regulation, right? Like how informed do I need to be? What's now falling on me? How is this happening? And so it leads us to this point now where all of a sudden we have this voice and we're at the table and we have a new layer of responsibility. We always were responsible. As I said, every algorithm I've ever built had a societal impact. Every piece of code I've ever written, I've always thought about, throughout the life cycle. If I'm looking at training data, what features do I have? What features am I missing? Knowing which features to choose and figuring out what's not represented in your data was something that we were already doing to be thoughtful. But now that we're in the area of Gen AI, it's a whole other thing. So what it takes us to is we now need to really embrace the spotlight that we've been given as data scientists. So the eyes are on us inside our companies and inside our institutions. And so now we need to be responsible throughout the machine learning lifecycle. So as I was saying, in that particular instance, what is the training data that you're using? If you're using a commercial LLM, which training data did they use? Was it on, if it's an LLM, was it Project Gutenberg? Was it on Common Crawl? Really having a transparency and an understanding of where that data is sourcing from. I've really enjoyed Hugging Face and just seeing the community and what people are putting together and how folks are working together. But we now need to go back to that machine learning lifecycle within Gen AI and take a new eye to it, right? So what we need to think about is we need to think about a variety of the areas of concern. So obviously previously we were worried about privacy and data mining, but now we have to be concerned about copyright, right? Or other kinds of laws about which data we can and can't use. I know there was a company recently, my husband sent me the article and I'm trying to remember the name of it today. There was a small Gen AI company and they had been using some copyright data and the Authors Guild came to them and said, you can't use that data. And it undermined that whole company's objective. And so what we as data scientists need to do now is we need to be the guardians of responsibility. So if we are working with a commercial LLM, what do we know about the source of that? If we're building our own, where is our data coming from? And then additionally, we now start to think of, if we think about that life cycle, when you think of EDA, what is the bias in the language that you have? Here in the US, we've got the two-party system. And so there had been some work done on one paper about the more conservative and the more liberal. Could we see that in different commercial LLMs, right? So the nature of EDA changes. What is the bias in that data? Are you representing the right amount of varied voices and varied information? We all are aware of hallucinations and misinformation. So how are you handling that misinformation? What are your checks on what's coming out? What is your GenAI ops plan for identifying misinformation? There's also the area of concern of what gets created that uses those hallucinations and how that becomes fact for others. The great thing about LLMs is their ability to speak to humans, but also when that comes out in natural language, for those who don't necessarily understand that it's mathematics, it's not magic, it's probabilities of which word should come next, being able to identify those hallucinations becomes important. Being able to use these tools in a classroom, what does that look like when we are the practitioners building them? Identity verification. So how can you use GenAI to identify people? We're very concerned about child protection. What are the models saying and doing? How are those models being used? And we've already heard, grievous harm from different kinds of chatbots that said things that people didn't realize they were going to say. So if we go back to this idea of the ML lifecycle, we need to have a deeper understanding of where that training data is coming from. We need to understand the parameters of that training data. What is that bias? What does it cover? When we're looking at the models, we have to have an understanding of model evaluation. So model evaluation previously was, okay, what's my R squared? How am I doing on my specificity? What does that F1 look like? Right? How are you going to evaluate if that model is doing well or not? I was talking with an interesting company earlier today called Deep Checks, and they're working on leveraging, creating an ML ops for your LLM and how that's working. So what is your plan for something like that? And then also, as we say here, then we look at putting that model into production. Well, what does it do once it's live? So what I just want you to think about, and where I want to encourage everyone at this point, is to really stop and say, okay, let me think about either how I'm using GenAI now, how does this map to my views on responsible AI and traditional ML, how is it different with GenAI, and am I making choices that are supporting being responsible in all of these areas? The other aspect of embracing this spotlight is, I've mentioned a number of times, the idea of the societal impact and responsibility, right? Algorithmic literacy at your family dining room table. But also, we are now someone who is in the public eye in our communities as well. I recently put up a little very brief 5 facts about AI, 5 truths and 5 myths about AI on Facebook, because I was just curious to see if I put something basic out there about algorithmic literacy, what would come back. And I had to be honest with you, people were terrified. I did a little bit of looking around APAC, and so I pulled a couple of quotes from some news sources. 51% of Indians fear AI will take their job. 75% of Australian employees fear the impact of AI. In Japan, nearly 70% in one survey were calling for regulating the AI bots. And in the US, 68% fear that AI will have an unpredictable circumstance that we can't control. In our communities, people are afraid. People are, they don't understand what it is. They don't know what that impact is. And we are the people building it. We are the people building what they are afraid of. And I'm not saying this to validate fears, right? I mean, yes, the world is changing. Yes, jobs will change. That's inevitable. But what I really want to drive home in this moment with you all here is that we are the people that are building these items. We are the people that are building AI. And it's worth noting that who we are in our communities changes too. Previously, when I would tell people I was a data scientist or I worked in AI, they're like, oh, that's smart people stuff. Now I'm in a room and I start talking about what I do and everybody has questions. When you are in a room where people have questions, answer their questions. Talk to them about what you do. Explain the math in a way that's understandable. Don't get too jargony. A couple of good analogies go a long way. But recognize that who you are in your community is forever changed as of this moment. And I just want to make sure that we as a community recognize that we are at the table. We have a voice. We are building a future. So, Alison, how do we do all these things? Well, the good news is there are many, many smart people that have been working on this for a long time. There are a number of different frameworks that you can start to look to. I'm going to put in even more into the slide set before we put it public for you folks. I'm going to bump that out a little bit and give you some more guidelines, but I want to go over a few. Back in Brussels in 2018, the original universal guidelines for AI came out. And the key principles are transparency, accountability, fairness and justice, privacy and security, robustness and collaboration. And one of the important things, which we've talked about already, is we must integrate these principles throughout the AI lifecycle. And probably for most of us, we've been doing this to some extent. And the impact, and this is where this drives home even more now than it did 5 years ago. The impact is that it builds public trust, it reduces risk, and it fosters responsible AI for innovation. You know, Raman Chowdhury had this wonderful ethical AI advocate, had a great quote when she was speaking to folks in Washington. She said, why we need regulation is because it's like putting brakes on a car. If you put brakes on the car, we can drive faster. So understanding that responsibility, which eventually will lead to regulation wherever you are in the world, I imagine, but just to understand these are the original guidelines. And as we move forward, the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act was finally put through in June of 2023, and it has a hierarchy of risk. So understanding what is the level of risk in what you are building and how much regulation should be aligned with that. So the reason I bring this to your attention is whether or not you're in a part of the world where this applies or regulation is coming, you want to be aware when you're looking at your models, where do you fall on this risk, right? Are you here at low or minimal risk? Computer games, spam filters, right? Not a ton of risk. But if you're talking about something where, you know, human resource management, or here at the top, real-time biometric identification systems in public spaces, right? Facial recognition on the streets of London, right? These are completely prohibited under that act. And again, this is a global community. It's going to change wherever you are, but regardless of where you are, having an understanding of where you are and what your algorithms are on this risk system will only benefit you as you take this critical, responsible thought to what you're doing. The last thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit is in the US, we have the AI risk management framework. And I'll give you more links to this, but here it's about governing. So the culture of risk management. where we manage these risks, we map the context and we map that risk, and then we measure that risk. And so really, there are many frameworks that are available to you. Some lead to regulation, some don't. But what I want you to just start with, if you can at the very least look at every one of the algorithms that you work on and have a clear understanding for yourself of what level of risk is this. So when this is finally out in the wild in society, what is it going to do? And then also understand how did I participate throughout the life cycle of building this with the societal impact in mind? And those two things are going to set you up to be not only innovative, but an ethical innovator in your world, in your community, in your company, in your team, in yourself. Okay? So my final quote for us tonight is, and what I want to ask you is, who do you want to have been in this moment? What is the future that you want to have built? When I became a data scientist, I knew that I was going to have impact, but where we are and who we are right now, we are in an incredibly powerful place to really create a future that can be phenomenal. So I encourage you all to ask yourselves, who do you want to have been? What is the future you want to have built? And know that when your children, my children, are in this very Gen AI dense world, what they're living in is something you contributed to, and you feel good about what you have created for them. So any questions? Data linkage that is used when dealing with medical data is 4. So I'm not, it might have been from an earlier conversation. So Daniel, I see your question. I'm not sure which piece you were actually referring to on that. I don't know if you want to re-ask that question. Does anybody else have any questions for us this evening? I know we have many people here. Oh, I see Daniel's getting back to us. I also want to thank you guys so much for having me here today. It's been really great to be able to have this conversation with you at this really important time. And I know we're close on time, but we do have 2 questions coming in right now. Do you think we can wait and answer these? Privacy and copyright. So the privacy and copyright. So on medical, yes, there's obviously in the US, we have something called HIPAA. I think one of the ways that we're challenged in the US around this idea of copyright is that what that covers and what is determined, what the laws are around the term fair use and how that can be used are changing. So the law where we are right now doesn't cover what it means to build a pattern based on something. So there's a lot of legality in question right now around that. I think Francois has a question as well. Is that if anybody has any follow-up questions, you are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. We are focusing on AI frameworks. How should we see the link between both AI and Gen AI? So what I'm going to be sharing with you is I'll be sharing with you specifically around some additional frameworks around Gen AI. But what I wanted to do, because the regulation is still open, what I want you to do is I want you to look at things such as the AI risk framework. We have some other guidelines from World Economic Forum, but I think the AI risk framework that we're working on in the US does a really good job of helping you dive into what are the risks within Gen AI that you can then leverage specifically. Yeah, so more light on child protection. So child protection is around, I know we're right at time, child protection is around a couple of different items. So Shivanshu, reach out to me directly and I'm happy to talk more about that. and maybe we can have some more conversations as well. So again, and I know that we have time to go. I want to thank you all so much. We really appreciate your time tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again at another talk in the future.